Welcome to Cory's Stories. Are you ready to meditate with Cory?
Hi friend, don't forget to subscribe, say that you like the video, and also press the bell so that you get notifications every time I make a new video. If you love Heidi, Cherry, and VAYA, or Tucker and Leo stories, you can now get exclusive stories on my Patreon account. Go to the links below the video and you can join Heidi, Cherry, and VAYA Club or the Tucker and Leo Club and get exclusive stories with your names in them. I love you all so much. Enjoy the story. Bye, friend.
Are you ready to meditate with Cory? Get comfortable in your bed so that you can relax your body. Let go of your busy day and hopefully fall fast asleep as you listen to the story. Casey was laid in bed. He'd turned his lamp on that he had next to his bed on the side table. All the other lights were off in his room, and his lamp that span around with the cowboys cut out on the shade was making their usual patterns all over the walls of his bedroom. As he watched the horses with the cowboy cutouts on them walking around the walls of his room, his eyes started to get heavy. He was having a hard time falling asleep. He'd eaten way too much candy, too late in the day, and now the sugar was keeping him awake. He felt like he'd been watching cowboys walking around his room for the longest time. He tried taking 3 deep breaths, his normal way of falling to sleep, falling into that dreamy place in his consciousness where he could go visit the other version of himself, the Casey that was a cowboy in one of his past lives a long time ago. The deep breaths weren't working because of the sugar, so he basically just had to wait it out, and he felt like he was trying to go to sleep forever. When he noticed that his eyes no longer wanted to stay open, he tried his 3 deep breaths once again. On his 3rd breath, Casey felt his body fall into the bed, even deeper. It was like he felt like he was laying on the surface of his bed, and then that 3rd breath made him feel like jello, as if his whole body was melting into the bed. Normally, when he did this, he found himself as Casey the cowboy quite quickly, in all different scenarios, whether he was out walking on Meadow, his horse, in the pasture, or whether he was in the barn. But this evening was different. Whether it was the sugar, whether it was just because it was different, he didn't know. But on this evening, he found himself somewhere different. He was riding on Meadow, his horse, on the beach. The beach didn't look quite right. It was fuzzy around the edges of his sight, like he could see clearly in the middle, looking forward. But to the outside of his sight's perimeter, it was all fuzzy and foggy and cloudy, like he was there, but he wasn't really there. Like he was journeying to a past life, but maybe he got stuck on the way there, didn't quite make the whole journey like he normally did. So instead he found himself on the back of meadow, running on the beach. The whole thing felt quite surreal. And the weird thing was, Casey, that was asleep on the bed, felt awake as if he was watching himself, having an experience, riding a horse on the beach, as if from above he was looking down, watching a movie screen of himself, traveling on the beach, on Meadow, running as fast as Meadow could. He was watching himself, experiencing a journey somewhere else, separately than himself. It was complicated, but it was like there were two cases, one in bed, asleep, but actually part of his mind, his consciousness, was awake. And then the other part of him was on the beach, on Meadow. And what made this experience even stranger for him was that he could feel both experiences, like he had two brains in two different places, being aware of two different experiences. It was really bizarre. So he felt himself in bed. He felt himself watching himself on the horse. He felt his thoughts. Oh, that's me, on a horse down there, running on the beach. Oh, I'm on Meadow. Oh, I wonder what I'm doing. Oh, this is weird. How come I'm watching myself? And then, at the same time, he felt his thoughts inside of Casey that was on the horse. The thoughts of Casey on the horse were like, oh, this is a lovely beach. This feels so good. The wind and the ocean smell so good. He was literally in two different places at the same time, feeling two different experiences. This had never happened to Casey. He'd always just gone straight to being in his past life, living it, never knowing what he was doing at home in bed. He was always either in one place or the other, never in two places at the same time. But he decided to go with it. It was something new. He felt like he tuned into the part of him that was there on the beach. He could hear the ocean, the waves rushing up onto the sand. He was running Meadow through the part on the beach where her feet and her ankles were in the water. He could smell the salt, the seaweed. He could hear seagulls flying and making noises in the sky. But what he sensed the most was the feeling. He felt like the blood was rushing up to the surface of his skin. It was flushing his face as the wind blew into his face and onto his chest. The wind, the air that he was running through was damp with the ocean, the particles from the ocean, making the air wet. And he could feel it as Meadow ran. It was like Meadow, his horse, could feel it too. The sheer pleasure of the fresh air hitting both of their faces, full speed. It sent waves of tingles down his spine, and the hairs on his arms were stood up. It gave him goosebumps. There was no one on this beach. And for a moment, as he looked around, the sheer beauty of the beach made him question whether this was real. Is this experience real? Am I really on the beach? Where am I? And why is it that all I can focus on is that is in front of me? If I turn my head, I can see other things. But if I just look forward, all I see is that's in front. Everything else around him was blurry, as if he was looking through a looking glass. And all he could see was what the glass was allowing him to see. Once again, the sensations of the cool, wet, damp air brought him back into his body on the beach. And he shivered. It seemed like Meadow had got even faster. Where was she running to? Or was she running from something? He tried to slow her down. He pulled on Meadow's reins, and this normally slowed her down, but right now, in this experience, it didn't do anything. He quickly realized he didn't have any control over Meadow. Meadow was just there, and he was just there, having this experience of running as fast as they could on the beach, together. He became very aware of his heartbeat. It was beating super fast. And then for a moment, his consciousness changed. And he was the part of Casey that was looking down, watching Casey running on the beach, the part of Casey that was laying in the bed, supposedly asleep. That part of Casey felt the heartbeat too. Both of them were experiencing a very fast, strong heartbeat. Casey, in bed, felt a little bit uncomfortable with this feeling. It made him feel as if there was something panicky happening. Like he was scared or something. But then, once again, his attention quickly switched, and the consciousness of the Casey riding the horse was back in charge. Casey put one of his arms down to feel down the front of Meadow as they ran fast. And that's when he realized that it was Meadow's heartbeat that was beating inside of his own body. It was like Meadow and Casey were one. Meadow's legs were his legs, Meadow's body was his body. Meadow's face was his face. Meadow's heart was his heart. Even though he wasn't, he was riding on the back of Meadow, but they joined together somehow in this experience. Like they were one thing, feeling the same things as each other. Casey in bed realized that that's what was happening. He could feel the Casey's heartbeat on the back of Meadow. And because he could feel Casey's heartbeat, it meant he could feel Meadow's heartbeat, because it was Meadow and Casey's heartbeat that had mixed together, that Casey in bed was now feeling. Oh my goodness, this was complicated, he thought to himself. But yet he was still right there in it. He was right there in the experience. And that's when he thought, I must be in between the two. I'm not quite there. I'm not quite here. I'm in the middle. And the middle looks like I'm on the beach, running on Meadow as fast as I can. This is the middle. This is where Casey's not quite a cowboy, and Casey's no longer just a schoolboy. He's in the middle, having an experience that was so awesome. He got pulled back into riding on the horse when he heard the waves. They seemed to start to crash even louder on the sand. All of the senses in his body became more enlightened, more aware and awake. His smell got stronger. His hearing got stronger. Yet his sight was still the same. Clear in the middle, foggy all around the outside. The smell was so strong. It was as if he could smell every single thing that was within the ocean. The vast, wide, open ocean. It felt like he could have been swimming through it, absorbing all the different things inside of the ocean through his skin. It felt that intense. The breeze in the air was strong. The sun and the sensations it was making on his skin was intense. That warm, tingly feeling when you're laid in the sun and it's shining down on you directly. That was intense. Everything became super, super intense. Like he was no longer just a human. He was something more. He could feel everything. He felt the ocean. He felt Meadow. He felt the sky, the sun, the birds, fishes in the sea. He felt all of it, as if it was running through the veins in his body. And he just kept running and running as fast as he could. He could feel the sand underneath Meadow's hooves, warm, and all the little particles moving under the weight of his body. He seemed to just float there for a while, trying to take it all in. Sometimes he would flash back into being in bed, looking down on himself running on the beach. But most of the time he stayed with being on the back of meadow on the beach. And then all of a sudden, he felt like he needed to pee. And he had this strong feeling in his body. It felt like being pulled. He was literally being pulled backwards. And there was a really loud clatter and clanging and banging in his head. And then, just like that, in less than a second, he felt like he dropped back into his body on the bed. Fully, solidly back in his body. And he quickly opened his eyes and took a big, big gasp of air. What the heck just happened? He thought to himself. He laid there for a moment, but then the natural urges in his body were screaming at him, "Go pee! Go pee!" And he got up and went to the bathroom. Casey could not fall back to sleep. He decided to just give up. He went to the desk in his room and got out a journal and wrote down the whole experience. He made sure to write down the date so he would never forget. He called it the in-between world because he had no clue where he'd just been. But the in-between world sounded about right. That's what it felt like anyway. The end.